Well, hello everyone and welcome to worship this morning. It is great to see you here. There has already been some conversation happening in that chat box on the right, so if you're just joining us, hop into that space, say hello, let us know who you are, where you're joining us from, and say hi to someone that you haven't met yet. That is an excellent space to meet some people. We've heard stories of people greeting each other in that space and later greeting each other face to face in the virtual coffee hour after worship, and those are the stories that we like to hear. So use that space to really start building some of those special relationships that can come out of a partnership such as the one we are experiencing as we gather here together from all sorts of different worshiping communities to share in one Sunday morning service. Last week as the service ended, I mentioned that it would be wonderful if we could pick up conversation this morning around the idea of encountering love unexpectedly. Those were what Scott and Jill testified to last weekend in the service. And so I wonder, as you're gathering in that chat space, or even as you gather with your family or whomever you might be watching this service with, maybe engage in a little bit of that conversation in the few minutes we have before the service starts. Where have you encountered love unexpectedly this week? I know for me, it was in just the willingness of people to show up for one another. There is so much going on in the world right now. We are all living a hectic life in a completely different way. Some of us are struggling with fears and anxieties. Some of us are overworking. Some of us are bored stiff. Some of us are concerned about the economy. Some of us are concerned about health. And all of those are really, really valid concerns, and they take up a lot of space in our lives. And I am just constantly amazed at people's willingness to be there for one another in this time. It seems like never before have we put the other first like we are right now. And so that to me has brought me a lot of hope. So I encourage you in the few minutes we have left to share some of those stories. Some of you are in the chat box, some of you can enter the comments section below. You can simply text your friend that you know is watching worship right now. It would be great to hear how love has shown up in your life this week. There are just a few moments before worship starts, so grab yourself something warm to drink, settle in, and we will see you after the service right here.
Saint Teresa of Avila, a 16th century Carmelite nun, Spanish mystic, theologian, and poet, wrote these words in a poem entitled, "I Loved What I Could Love." Have you ever walked across a stream stepping on rocks so as not to spoil a pair of shoes? All we can touch, swallow, or say aids in our crossing to God and helps unveil the soul. Life smooths us, rounds, perfects, as does the river the stone. And there is no place our beloved is not flowing, though the current's force you may not always like. Our passions help lift us. Our passions help lift us.
Here we are, at the base of the stairs, at the beginning of this pathway of candles, at the beginning of a time of worship. Welcome to Highlands United Church, to St. Andrew's Wesley United Church, and to this time that we share together. And hey, thank you so much for sticking with us through our technical difficulties and persisting with hopefully lots of lively chat on the chat box. It's been quite a journey this morning, and we are at the beginning of our worship journey now. As we have been on the Emmaus Road journey for these last number of weeks, I'm so glad that you're here. We're not the first to have walked this way geographically in this place. In this part of the world, those who have stewarded the lands include the Coast Salish peoples. This is the unceded territory of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. And we are on a journey with them as well, seeking a new relationship, a renewed relationship, a just and reconciled relationship. And we hope that wherever you are, that you would join in that journey of reconciliation as well. My name is Will Sparks. I serve Highlands United Church along with a team of staff and wonderful volunteers that are all a part of that ministry, and these days in partnership with St. Andrews Wesley United Church. It is good to be in ministry together. And we'd all like you to know that just go onto our website and find out what's going on during the week and reach out and connect with the ministries of both Highlands United Church and St. Andrews Wesley United Church. So now let us take a moment to center ourselves, let go of all the technical difficulties we've been having all morning. Take a breath, center, and step onto the path.
There once was someone who said such amazing things and did such wonderful things that people couldn't help but follow him. But they did not know who he was, and so one day they simply had to ask. And he said, "I am the light." And that Christ's light is within us. It surrounds us and guides us and inspires our hearts and our living. Thanks be to God.
Have you ever begun your day and just been struck by the amazing fact that you are here? Alive, pulse beating, lungs drawing in the clean air, eyes dazzled by the color and the shape of the world. We walk into God's world, and every once in a while we stop and say, "We are here."
And worship is our way to press pause to all the burdens, all the troubles, the to-do lists and the can't-do lists. Together, using our breath, we turn around a corner of the path together, walking alongside the holy.
So to gather yourself, join Jen and I in a body prayer, a way of centering. And you can do this sitting or standing. And we're just going to repeat 2 phrases and very simple gestures, but it helps us center in the time we are now. Here we go. I am here. I am here. I am here.
And as we understand ourselves connected to a love so much larger than we can imagine, we say, God is here. God is here. God is here.
So bright.
My soul cries out with a joyful shout that the God of my heart is great. That is our Easter proclamation, our Easter song, the greatness of God alive in the world. Will you join me as we open our hearts to the greatness of God in prayer? Holy, ever-present One, we are attentive to the state of our heart as we gather for worship this morning. We are listening. The path we walk in our life and the narrative path of our sacred story weave in and out of one another. These days, we walk safely distanced from one another, but still encounter each other and still encounter you. Our hearts open and close, rise and fall. Today, we would linger here in worship in the hope that we would sense your presence, feel your closeness, be reminded of your love for us, and energized by hope. Even if our senses fail us and we lose sight of you, and enter the heart of worship, we pray, in the name of the one we seek to follow, in whose presence our hearts burn within us. Amen.
Hello, friends. It's good to be with you. Today, Allie is taking some much-deserved time off, and we pray that she is finding the rest that she needs and having much fun with her dear family. Last week, we heard from Mouse and the birds what was going on for them and how they were doing and what was important to them. And we thought that it would be good to hear from others this morning. And so I'm very grateful to some children and youth who shared what was important to them and what made their hearts come on fire. We know that many folks are having some big feelings at this time. And as you watch and as you listen, I pray that you may find what is on your heart and share it with someone and feel surrounded by a whole lot of love and support. So now, let's listen.
Hey, Kaden, it's really great to be with you today. Awesome. Hey, I was wondering for you right now, what is setting your heart on fire? What for you is really, really important in this time?
For me, it's spending time with my family and doing things that I don't normally get to do. For instance, I've been baking a lot, and it's just really enjoyable to do stuff like that without having other stuff to do.
That's cool.
What's really keeping me going right now is reading Harry Potter because the story is so interesting and the people just, they're really cool. And it takes me away from what's happening in the world right now and just lets me be in my own space. And yeah, I started reading in April, and I've gotten so far. I'm on the 4th book now, and it's really enjoyable for me.
Joshua, what is setting your heart on fire? What's energizing you? What's most important to you in this moment?
Well, Jen, I'd say that's mostly spending time with my family, going on nice long walks, and also watching movies. Like just last night, we watched the new live-action Aladdin movie.
I've mostly been talking to my friends. I've been able to talk to them pretty much every day, which has been really nice and has just been keeping me going. I also have a few hobbies that I've been doing, which has been keeping me busy and kept me sane. Yeah, that's about it.
I like going for walks and with my family and me and Mom and Daddy. Oh no.
Thank thank you to all the children and youth that shared your story right now. It's so important when we can't see you to hear more about how it's going for you and what's setting your heart alight. Now, Lily mentioned a walk with her parents as being something that she really enjoyed, but I think the walk that the disciples took on the road to Emmaus was a little bit more confusing for them. So let's hear that story. Let's hear the word from Andria today, Luke 24, verses 24 to 32. Thank you to all the children and youth that shared your story right now. It's so important
morning,
when
everyone.
we can't see you.
The
to
reading
hear
for this
more about how
morning
it's going for you and what's
is coming from the book of Luke 24, verses 24 to 32. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but they did not see him. Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church.
Were our hearts not burning within us? That was the line that jumped out to Jen, Will, and I. Were our hearts not burning within us? Sometimes I think we go out into the world looking for big moments, big dramatic unfoldings in our life. But I wonder if sometimes Spirit speaks to us more subtly, that we encounter life and the path, and little things set our heart a-burning. We have two very different testimonies from two people about what it's like to notice their heart catch fire. Sometimes it leads in one direction, and sometimes it leads on a much more windy path. Let's hear the testimony from Ursula and Ian on what set their heart afire.
Hi, my name's Ursula, and I'm the Bookings and Communications Coordinator at St. Andrews Wesley. I want to tell you about a project we're working on at STAW, but first let me share with you how this project came to be. In October 2019, my heart broke when news came out that the current Chilean government started to commit human rights violations against peaceful protesters. I was seeing images and hearing accounts of horrendous acts of violence committed against protesters. These acts of violence mirrored those of the military regime committed against the Chilean people, like my parents, in the 1970s and 80s. You see, Chile had regained its democracy in 1990, and with that, the hope for a more just and equal society. But this didn't happen. Economic injustice was woven into the very fabric of Chile's democratic system. Years and years of neoliberal economic policy has led Chile to become one of the most economically unjust countries in the world, where rivers can be privatized and sold forever, where a river that once flowed for 1 million years is now a dry waste and its waters diverted into private pools. The list of economic injustices is too long to go into, but a few very quickly are: the theft of pensions, the privatization of everything, corporations owning mountains, rivers, and even indigenous territories. They would privatize the air if they could. In an instant, I became a political activist, knowing that this was always in my DNA, but now seeing that these injustices were occurring for the second time in my life, I could no longer remain on the sidelines without a response. First, we organized ourselves here in Vancouver to create awareness of what was going on in Chile. We had weekly meetings, raised funds to support the maimed and wounded demonstrators, many of whom were maimed for life, held cultural events to express our support creatively, and demonstrated peacefully ourselves in solidarity with the Chilean people. My partner Rod and I had been planning a trip to Chile for about a year when all this happened. We debated whether or not to go. We had serious apprehensions as the violence was real. The oppression was real, but so was our need to respond and our need to see our homeland and family. So instead of canceling the trip, we decided to go. Now we were in the epicenter of the movement. Literally, we were staying within walking distance of the movement's epicenter. We are witnessing the massive creative spirit of the Chilean people on walls, in the street art and graffiti everywhere we went. Everywhere we went, we saw the fearless response to the government oppression, in the voices of the street musicians, in the vendors selling vegan food on the streets, in the conversation with Uber drivers. Everywhere a sense of energy, a response to injustice, a desire for equality. All this energy and experiences ignited a fire in my heart. It inspired and helped me to cultivate an artistic expression in the form of an arpillera. An arpillera is a form of resistance art using the medium of textiles depicting scenes of injustice. They help denounce human rights violations. It is recognized as a subversive women's art in an authoritarian political context. I found that through this textile art medium, I could reach out to communities and build connections and awareness for so much injustice we see today. We could even expand the vision of what arpilleras were to incorporate and express how we feel about injustices here at home now, such as environmental justice, the housing crisis, and justice for the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We don't need violent oppression to create resistance art. We just need to see clearly that there are people that are suffering, that their basic human rights are not being met even here in Canada. Until the day when every sentient being and its environment is protected, there is need for resistance art. The arpillera is a form of art that I chose to express and share with the STA community. The final goal is to install and present it on the hoarding wall on Nelson Street in the near future. We invite you to come by and experience the art. Our desire is to inspire you and the community to feel the fire within you for a more just and loving world.
Hello, everyone. So I used to have passion envy. So what does that mean? Well, you know, I went through some years of my life where if you'd asked me what I was passionate about, I might have just told you that I don't know. It wouldn't have been a lie. I would look at all these happily self-actualized people around and I wondered why I didn't get to feel like how they looked, you know? Like, I mean, I had things in my life that I enjoyed doing, but I didn't really feel that deeply connected to them. Like if they'd all stopped at once, it wouldn't have been the end of my world or anything. And so the question is, since we get to some pretty pure places of the human experience, you know, like what is it that sets your soul on fire? You know, what is it that drives you and makes you the most who you are, and what can't you stop doing because otherwise, you know, you wouldn't be you, and what are your passions and how do they lead you in your life? And for a while, I just couldn't figure out what I was passionate about, you know, despite all the pressure from the Lululemon shopping bags that were everywhere that would tell everyone to go live their passions and all this. And even now, I wouldn't really say that I'm led by my passions. You know, I'm usually excessively practical, and like many of us, the snapshots of my life are, you know, vastly more interesting than, you know, than watching a time-lapse video of me in my living room or anything. And what I've come to realize pretty recently, like Wednesday, I think, was that I've been looking for something far too specific, and that instead, maybe I just shouldn't be looking. And this week, a friend of mine turned me on to this book that I totally didn't read, but like any good millennial, I read the Wikipedia page for it. And what struck me was the author's view that the meaning of life is found in every moment of living. Whoa. So when I think about the things that I love doing, like rock climbing and telling jokes and fire spinning and riding my bike and writing and volunteering my time to make just totally bizarre art projects, I realize that what I love most in any of these things is just reacting to the moments. And the thing I'm looking for, maybe I just need to shut up and listen for. Like it's the inner voice that tells me like, hey, try this, or, travel light and hang on tight, or that maybe I should just go ahead and make that really, really great, phenomenal pun about, whatever. It's even like this feeling, this like the palpable excitement, this vibrating that I feel in my eyeballs when I'm truly firing. It's like the spark where suddenly there's possibility where before there was just a mistake or a hilarious way to connect two disparate ideas that in something that I'm writing, or even just when I see an inanimate object that just desperately needs a pair of googly eyes. Basically at its essence, it's just about coming alive a little bit more in whatever I'm doing, So the short answer these days to the question of what my passions are, I would amend from I don't know to I don't know yet. Case in point, as soon as I stopped this video, I just fell through my chair, and it's totally hilarious.
Well, when we invite people to take a risk with a testimony, I don't think that's exactly what we mean. So now we owe Ian a chair. Thank you both, Ursula and Ian, for those testimonies. In both, you hear different journeys down a path. You hear the patience involved in wondering. And you hear the courage it takes to follow something when you don't really know where it will end up. Yet you trust in the signal of your heart being on fire. But let's return to the story. The disciples walk along the path, and they're turning the story of resurrection over and over between them, trying to make sense of it. The world has changed, or at least that's what everyone is saying, but it's unclear how and to what end. They meet a stranger on the road, and he asks them, "What are you talking about?" So they engage him in conversation. He says some interesting things. He's oddly compelling, and they feel their pulses quicken. And on impulse, they ask him, come eat with us. They continue to talk, finding themselves energized and hopeful, their heart alight by the conversation. And then the stranger breaks the bread and offers it to them. And in that oh so familiar gesture, they suddenly recognize him. And with that, he vanishes. It's a brief glimpse. This story and this time we're in, I'm having trouble pulling them apart. For me, they're a little bit like those Russian nesting dolls, the metrochoika, those little people who build off of each other, containing pieces of each other, lovely on their own, but shaped so similarly that it doesn't entirely make sense to see them individually, but only as a set. Because here we are too, like the confused disciples, finding it easier to look back on the path than forward, turning the story of COVID-19 over and over again with friends and family, where all the while, right at our feet, there is a moment to pause and notice where might our heart be set on fire in this time? Where might we be burning with spirit, she who uses flame to get our attention, to burn purpose back into our souls? For it's in the looking back sometimes that we can see more clearly what Spirit is trying to tell us, rather than in the moment we're enmeshed in with our fears, our worries, our desires, our goals. I think one of the most challenging things about this time for me is the realization that while we're all participating in an experience together, we're not having the same experience. For every retiree who's trying to use this time just to work on their garden, there's someone in the downtown east side who has spent years in a state of uncertainty and trauma, who just last weekend finally got an apartment of their own where they can be safe and clean. For every person who missed a hoped-for vacation, there is someone out of work right now, homeschooling 2 children and wondering, what next? And for every picture of a young person flocking to the beach, there is a 20-year-old who doesn't know when they'll work again. And with each month that passes, they know their dream of going to college is delayed. And they can't even spend time with their friends to talk about it. So we're sharing an experience together, each from different lenses. And what is reflected back at us right now is an imbalance that the early disciples would have been aware of. Somehow, even in a land of plenty, of abundant life, there is not enough for all of us. Now, this is not a new insight. We know this already. We knew it well before COVID. I don't think you would be here attending a virtual church, participating in a 2,000-year-old faith if you had not had your own heart lit on fire with the possibility that this wondrous world, this abundant life, could include each and every one of us and our precious planet too. Who among you have not had your heart broken by something that just wasn't right, and then set aflame by the hope that it could be different? And so maybe now is the time to try and see those tiny flames that might be a light in this situation. Not to build a false hope that everything's going to be fine because it wasn't before, but because by looking right now, we might indeed find a better way forward. In every moment, Spirit is giving us a pause point to see the longing that God has for the world and for us. And our hint might just be what sets our own hearts ablaze, what startles and disturbs us, and what lures us forward like a campfire on a pitch-black winter's night. So where in this moment may the Spirit have set our hearts a-burning? I wonder if we have seen Spirit walking ahead on the path with all those things that have been put in place right now that we were told were just not possible. We now have people with a guaranteed income right now, so for once they're not living hand to mouth. That was impossible, but we're doing it. We've watched an aching planet that's needed us to reduce our emissions right now all of a sudden have a chance to breathe. And that's not even a metaphor at the moment. Watching creatures emerge, it's all happening right now, and they're flourishing. And okay, if you live in Wales, they're flourishing too much. Mountain goats are taking over the town, but still, who would have thought? And for every person who's crawled through the appalling Vancouver commute and asked their work, could we try working from home, and been told, oh, it's impossible. Somehow we've pivoted. Schools and some companies removing congested motorways, pivoting and allowing people to work differently. Now, I'm not saying these are all great solutions or sustainable solutions or even the right ones or enough, but isn't it interesting? When the threat of mortality hit us collectively, the response showed us that at least here in Canada, we actually do value people more than money, more than status, more than the way that we needed to. And this was and is no fantasy, actually, for us to imagine and create a world where people might be cared for, where the planet might be treated as precious, and where economies and human lives are given the right weight. So maybe right now you have felt a flame of hope in watching some of this, even in the challenge and the despair of this time, when you witness some of the shifts that are happening. But if looking at the world this week has been just too much, then maybe look at the canvas of your own life. In our own ordinary lives, we have this miracle that Spirit actually bothers to tug on our own heart too. She burns in each and every one of us. We heard from Ursula and Rhian on how their very different paths were set alight and courses were changed. And we know that Spirit calls directly to us. We might be reminded by these words from John, "The beloved knows your name, not the name everyone else says, but the name that brings you life." So even in this time, Spirit will call us all to new life right now. Even in this time that feels like a perpetual Lent or a constant Holy Saturday on repeat, who knows, even in a time of pause, it might actually be possible for us to listen more carefully to God's call to us. For Spirit is calling us to be awake in each moment, each breath, each minute. And we can pay attention to where our hearts are lit up and try to live from that place. Spirit wants us awake and ready. She's launching an unquenchable hope. And while getting by and being safe and dealing with the immediate needs of right now is very important, and we'll all get enmeshed in that, it isn't actually the spiritual work we're invited to do. So, like disciples on the path, we too can do resurrection work. We can be attentive. We can find the places that set our soul afire. And we can try to live out that promise of change in a world that needs healing and help and justice. So we invite you this week to take a look while you journey on the path. Take note of any time your heart is set aflame with the desire for the planet to be protected, or the poor to be fed, or the economy to be a just system, or even just for your own kindness and compassion to feel like a larger gift than it sometimes feels like to you. And if you need to paint or dance or plant or mend or sing or play or even scream a little, if that fans the flame right now, make some time to do that too. For the time is now to uncover what God is calling us to do and be as we walk into an Easter world that has the potential to be set alight with a true and lasting hope. May it be so. Amen.
join me in a time of prayer together? O God of this resurrection season, you meet us on the road, the Emmaus road, and we don't always recognize it, except maybe later, when we remember an encounter and realize our hearts were burning, and remember street art and realize a chord has been struck within us, or feel the wind in our hair and in the moment realize intuitively a flow that feels like some kind of familiar more. And we dare to address you in prayer, step into conversation with a spirit that is so far greater than we can imagine. We dare to give voice to our desire to be in sync with you. Hear, O God, our prayer of awe and wonder at the life of the world and the life we are living, the life which aches for wholeness and justice and beauty and love. Let that ache be our prayer to you in this moment. Hear our prayer for those who suffer. Suffer because they have a hard time finding a place to live that is safe. Suffer because they are sick or grieving or alone. Suffer because they are isolated, because connection is risky. Hear our prayer for those who put their lives on the line for others. Those who, out of dogged determination, don protective gear and put themselves in harm's way. Those who have given their lives to protecting others in so many other ways. Hear our prayer for leaders, teachers, cleaners, grocery workers, and so many who do what they do in new and often awkward ways, but necessary ways, for the sake of the life of all of us. Hear our prayers for the prayers of our hearts, for those people and situations that are especially in our minds today. We have named some in the chat box, and we name some quietly now in our hearts. And we include in those, that long list of people we have gathered throughout the weeks, we include new people: John, Katrina, Cy, and Margie, Crystal, Sam, Andrew, Peter, and April. Children and teens, teachers and students and families as they deal with uncertainty. Margaret, Heather, Casey, Carol, Leanne, Michelle and family, Shirley, the Denos, Wilma, Jean, Doug, and refugees. O God of this resurrection season, meet us again this week on the way. The path marked by, arrows on the floor, lines on the road, little signs on mountain trails, or simply the path of daily living. Ignite in us a flame of the heart, though we may not realize it in the moment, that is your handiwork. Hear these desires, offered as we seek a path that mirrors the path of Jesus, whose words we now sing together in prayer. We are about to sing our closing song, Deep in Our Hearts. But before we do that, I want to recognize that giving is taking place day after day, week after week in communities of faith here and all over the world. And I simply want to acknowledge with gratitude that the financial gifts given to Highlands United Church or St. Andrews United Church or whatever community of faith you support with your financial givings is not just a financial transaction. I know that. We know that. It's about a commitment to community, and it's about a commitment to vision that is burning in your heart. And that is a beautiful thing. There is something in the human heart that compels us to give, to put our time, our creativity, our financial resources out into the world for the sake of God's love and justice and peace. Isn't it incredible that God has kind of stitched that right into the fabric of our being? And it's such a clever and beautiful plan and reality that is woven into our hearts. I would encourage you to pay attention to the way that functions in your life and the way it is in you, and to follow that impulse into reaching out, into whether it be through Highlands United online or whether it be through St. Andrews Wesley or your home church or some other ministry that ignites a flame in your heart. Together, we can be an expression of God's passion for the world. Together. A passion that is deep in our hearts as well. So let's sing together. Friends, we now go out into a world that is embraced by God, a world, we join the path of the world in which we will encounter God's very heart. So let us go knowing that we are surrounded by God, knowing that the Christ light goes before us all the way, knowing that the Spirit is that which stirs up a flame of life within us.
As we go out into the world, we're going to be left with a blessing from the children that will set your heart afire for this whole week. Go in love.
stories and their talents this morning with us in the worship service, to the children who contributed to the gathering time and the blessing, to the youth that did as well, and to Ian and Ursula for sharing your testimony in the service. It was so wonderful to hear the different expressions of how our hearts are set ablaze these days. So that might be the question that we open with next week when we gather here. If you are looking to attend the coffee hour that is happening right now, you can email caretakers@standrerswesley.com and you will receive a Zoom link for that meeting. So that's how you can gain access to that. It is an open invitation to any of you who are here with us right now. And of course, throughout the week, if you are looking for what's going on, you can check out our website, either highlandsunited.org, standrerswesley.com. It'll be below the video, so take a look at that. And also watch the announcement slides before and after the service on Sunday mornings, because those will let you know what's taking place in the community. But for now, I hope that you enjoy the rest of your May long weekend. I hope you stay safe. I hope you stay healthy.